On the Common Link Theory, CLT, by Alhomoudi, Mcgill University, 2006. The third kind of fard nasbi is the one transmitted from one particular city or region to another. For instance, a hadith found only in Mecca would, among subsequent generations of transmitters, be found in Medina. However, this very rare kind of fard is difficult to explain, and Schacht did not take it into account in his theory, as he most likely never encountered any case of it. In sum, Schacht succeeded to a large degree in reflecting the Sunnah's historicity in his definition, accounting for the successive phases of its development. But when it comes to the collection of hadith, there is no indication that he was fully aware of the traditionist standards of authentication employed for acceptance and rejection. In the foregoing discussion, it has not been my intention to judge the veracity of methods for authenticating prophetic hadith per se. Rather, my concern lies specifically in articulating the problem of Schacht's misinterpretation of the CL. This problem will be more fully developed in due course, after having provided some practical examples of tafarrud. 4. Practical cases of tafarrud. The previous section of this chapter provides definitions for the different forms of isolated traditions according to the muhaddiths, and their rules related to fard hadiths and wihdan transmitters. To further illustrate this phenomenon, practical examples of how muhaddiths dealt with these types of fard in their literature will be provided here. Despite rare and exceptional cases, the muhaddiths generally tended to eliminate wihdan and fard mutlaq from their collections due to their weakness, as we have discussed in the previous section. Muhaddiths normally devoted entire independent works to fard and wihdan hadiths. The most famous collections on fard and wihdan hadiths are Munfaridat wal Wihdan by Muslim al-Naysaburi, Al-Muntakhab min Gharaib Malik by Ibn Miqari al-Asbahani, and Al-Afrad by Abu Hafs ibn Shaheen, and Al-Afrad wal Gharaib by Ibn Zurayk al-Dalal, and Afrad wal Gharaib by Khalaf ibn al-Wasiti, and Al-Afrad by Hassan ibn Shad'an, and Atraf al-Gharaib wal Afrad by Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi, a book which in and of itself contains 6,400 hadiths of different types of fard and afrad, and another work called Afrad Muslim by Abdul Ghani Maqdisi. So these are the famous collections separate collections on fard and wihdan hadiths that these various scholars collected. It is worth noticing that the above books are not limited to wihdan or fard mutlaq hadith, which Schacht's theory takes to be exhaustive of all solitary reports, but also includes other types of fard, such as fard nisbi. Al-Muntakhab min Gharaib al-Malik gives a vivid picture of muhaddith's practical position towards fard hadiths. In this monograph, Ibn al-Miqari selected 31 of Malik's hadiths which were considered gharib. A study of those hadiths helped to elaborate the meaning of gharib and fard when used by traditionists. The first hadith in Al-Muntakhab, narrated by Ibn Miqari from Muhammad ibn Bahili, from Abdurrahman al-Rikki, from Muawiyah bin Hisham, from Malik, from Zuhri, from Anas, reports that the Prophet entered Mecca wearing al-Mighfar, and Mighfar is a helmet. Ibn Abdul Bar states, "To my knowledge, no one has narrated this hadith via Malik other than Bishr ibn Umar." If we apply Schacht's theory, this statement would indicate that Bishr is the common link of this hadith. However, Zurqani, who is a trained Maliki muhaddith, understood Ibn Abdul Bar differently and said Ibn Abdul Bar meant that no one has narrated this hadith via Malik in the Muwatta, because it has been narrated via Malik by more than 10 transmitters, but in different hadith collections. In other words, Bishr's narration was considered fard only with respect to the Muwatta. The hadith is a prime example of fard nisbi. The second hadith in Al-Muntakhab represents what traditionists classify as munkar, or some muhaddiths would call gharib. Ibn al-Miqari narrates from Ahmed bin Ali, from Ahmed ibn Wahab, from Malik, from al-Zuhri, from Anas, from the Prophet, that he said, "If dinner is served at the time of Isha prayer, then you should begin with the dinner." In this hadith, Ahmed ibn Wahab is the only transmitter, and the so-called common link who transmits the hadith via Malik. However, recognizing Ibn Wahab as the common link does not imply that he fabricated the isnad and was responsible for its spreading. Muhaddiths recognize that he is the common link in this particular isnad via Malik, yet they accepted the matan because it was narrated by many other transmitters via 3 companions who share the Prophet himself as a common link, as explained in the diagram 8. Similar to the previous case of munkar, but with a rejected matan. The third case was narrated by Al-Mikari, Ibn al-Mikari, from Ahmed al-Anbari, from Uthman ibn Salih, from Ismail ibn Abu Uwais, from Uwais, from Malik, from Zuhri, via Anas, reports that the Prophet sought help from Jews in a battle and gave them a share of the spoils. Ibn Abi Uwais claimed that Malik narrated the hadith from Zuhri via Anas, while other reliable transmitters, i.e. Yazid ibn Yazid, Haywa ibn Shurayh, and Ibn Jurayj, narrated the same hadith from Malik from Zuhri, a follower of the first generation, from the Prophet directly, as a mursal hadith, without mentioning Anas, the companion in the isnad. Since Ibn Abi Uwais is not a reliable transmitter, and all of those who contradict this narration are reliable transmitters, then Ibn Abi Uwais's isnad will be considered gharib and thus rejected. In this case, the hadith will remain weak, as opposing, in this case, a mursal hadith, which is considered weak. Stay tuned for many more parts.